But as tensions grow in the Far East, British nationals have continued to evacuate for destinations in Australia and India.
Does Australia look to be as rich in resources as the Americas?
And so Australia finds itself a vital cog in this grand endeavour.
Western shore of Australia.
And direct from Australia, the boomerang bow tie.
Coming red.
And that's why Tucker and I are moving to Australia.
Across the Indian Ocean to Australia and New Zealand, and on to Burma, China, India and Malaya.
4, 5, 6. I didn't have to go to Australia.
Ambassador, what part of Ottoman Empire did Australia get?
Put out your elements on your strike.
Ancient China, Egypt, Australia, Asia.
From Australia.
You stay in Australia, Al?
आप जानते हो ऑस्ट्रेलिया कहाँ है? दिखाऊं मैं आपको?
Australia. For Australia.
Australia? New Guinea? Solomons?
Come on, I was hoping to meet a girl on the Australia trip.
Australia.
Australia trying to find the groove as they head to the windward mark.
Australia.
Coming to you live from Olympic Stadium in Melbourne, Australia.
Australia बहुत अच्छा जगह
है. For God's sake, Australia!
Australia doggedly hanging on to the lead.
For goodwill and fair play, it's going to be a red letter day. Not only for Melbourne, but for all Australia when the Olympic fanfare rings out.
You'll be in Australia with your young man.
Cincinnati, you have got to get to Melbourne. Melbourne.
You could sell the yard and would go away to Australia. Nobody would know us there.
You know, in Australia, the trees bloom in September.
You know, she's run off to Australia with her NA sponsor.
Yeah, we have a gig starting next week in Australia, so.
Young William's back from West Australia.
She's out. Australia.
You're from England?
No, I'm from Australia.
You're in England or Australia or the North Pole?
Yeah, that's right.
You remember that aunt I told you about in Australia?
I don't know what I'm going to do when you're in Australia.
Australia, if you look around you, we got people living in Australia and coming in.
Hey, Morgan, you're going to be down there trying to get us back, right? In Australia.
I did some recon. She's from Australia.
Good God, Frank. If you could get threepence back on all those bottles, you could buy Australia.
He's probably the most famous dog in all Australia.
I hear good things about Australia.
أنا نعم جاي أتصل من أستراليا جاي أدور على ديان محسن.
Australia?
I'm from Australia. Yes.
In 1770, Captain James Cook's ship ran aground off the coast of Australia, and he led a party into the country, and they met the Aboriginal people.
In 1848, he attempted to cross Australia to the ocean with 7 horses and 20 mules.
In what year did the British settle in Australia?
Go back to West Family where you came from!
I could see some lights down there in Australia, Gordo.
You got a boyfriend in Australia?
From Australia and Tibet. He's not Israeli.
It reminds me of my mother's cooking in Australia.
It's showdown time in Perth, Australia.
I've factored in the average weather in that part of Australia over the last 20 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, all of Australia is with us today. Come to cheer the boys on.
Yeah, I went surfing in Australia once.
Look, Ocean King are stoked to be here supporting surfing at a grassroots level in Western Australia.
In what year did the British start deporting convicts to Australia?
These made it one of the most significant Victorian boom towns in Australia.
In Australia, our religion is sport.
Now we got 4 real-life Aborigines from Australia, and they're gonna be putting it down out there for you to know.
You remember the girl from Australia?
Australia?
Right, she's this Australian girl.
She came out here from Australia when she finished high school.
Maybe he's right. After all, this is Australia.
Neither is native to Australia.
Okay, look, Polly and prison and Australia, none of it matters.
Peter, this is sister-in-law Naomi, visiting from Australia.
So, are you heading to Australia too?
Now Australia has the largest feral camel population in the world.
Oh, you told me he fucked off to Australia.
No, I'm done with Australia.
So born in Australia.
Must be hard coming all the way here from Australia.
ROCK in the USA. Or whatever they say in Australia.
Meanwhile, more than 500,000 coalition forces are pouring into Australia
and 3 captured ports.
There's not really that much of this kind of thing in Australia.
Oh, so you're from Australia?
This is an historic day for Australia.
There are herds of feral camels roaming freely throughout Central Australia, and my idea was to capture a few and train them to carry my gear.
They lead 3-2, but as they head for the finish, it's Australia just in front.
The Fortean Times reported violent bird swarms twice last month in Australia and Japan.
And the only place I've ever had any problems is in a small town in Australia.
The Quran was written before Australia was discovered, and the Prophet didn't know about the beaches here.
South America, Australia, Singapore, Egypt.
Somebody's got to keep Australia beautiful.
The general quietly pulled some strings, stationed your only son in Australia as far from the war as possible.
Then I met my wife, and I moved with her to Australia.
The Americans squeaking out their victories over 7 other international contenders in their bid to challenge Australia. The question for Australia, can they stay close enough to attack downwind?
There are those who say he's still alive, living in Australia.
There's a lot of wind in Australia.
I can go down there to Australia and win it back.
We got Australia over there, Croatia, Belgium.
Welcome to Australia, cocksucker!
We have a chef from Sydney, Australia.
Well, Australia, it must be really nice there since they got rid of the apartheid.
Well, I'm 18. I leave Australia.
हमने एक परिवार ढूंढा है वहाँ ऑस्ट्रेलिया में जो आपकी देखभाल करना चाहते हैं.
We're going to emigrate to Australia.
Australia, actually.
This race belongs to Australia.
There are over 50,000 feral camels across Australia.
Tomorrow you will be on a boat back to Australia.
2 years in Australia.
We are leaving for Australia tomorrow.
We're building a big new antenna in Australia.
What do you think?
Australia is a paradise for the likes of me.
Australia.
Columbus found America. Cook found Australia.
Yeah, I mean, Australia is not like anywhere else on this planet.
Maybe 4, maybe 5 years ago, did some work here. He was on his way to San Francisco. He said he's hoping to book a passage on a boat to Australia.
Yeah, like they don't have cocaine in Australia or something, you know.
Why did the British deport convicts to Australia?
Well, what do you expect? Many of them are from Australia.